Welcome back to the fourth and final part of this tutorial series where we're going to look at one more technique that Depth Scanner can really help us out with. So for this one, we're going to look at using the depth map to provide information to a displacement map so that we can actually appear to rotate a camera through a 2D image and actually give that 2D imagery a sense of depth as we're doing that. So we're going to make something like this, but we're going to actually use the image that we generated for our foreground here, since we should all have something similar for that. So let's go ahead and get started by creating another new composition. We can call this Hero Displace. We're 1920 by 1080. 30 seconds, that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and there is our new composition. So we'll start with dropping our forest image in this comp for us. Now, we do want to scale this down a bit, but we don't actually want to fit it to the composition, and we'll see why later. So we want to leave it a bit larger. I'm going to go to about 80% scale for my image. But basically, you just want to have some wiggle room around all the edges. Since we're going to displace and rotate, if we actually fit it to the composition, we're going to lose the image on the sides. So this 80% is going to work pretty well for me here. So we're going to leave it at that. Now we're going to want to generate a depth map, which means we need to click onto our layer, search for our depth scanner plugin, excuse me, and we can apply that to our layer. So right away we see a pretty good depth map here for us. I'm going to click onto this depth anything v2 large indoor. And unlike our parallax animation where we were slicing out just the foreground, we really want to see about as much depth here as we can. It's really going to help us with that displacement map. So this model gives us a nice view of these trees kind of fading out into the background, and then some nice stark whites up here to give us some contrast. So this model is going to work well for us. So now that we have this in place, we've generated our depth map. Let's go ahead and duplicate this layer. So you can just click onto it, Command D or Control D for PC, we'll duplicate it, and then we'll take this top layer and we'll just delete our depth scanner effect. So now we have one layer that is our depth map and another layer that's just our forest image. So this top layer that's just the image right now is where we're going to want to apply our displacement map. So if you just search for displacement, you'll see displacement map pop up. We're going to apply that effect. So the first thing this effect is going to ask you for is it's going to say, where do you want me to pull this information for the displacement from? We know that our depth map is on our forest to our second layer here. So we're going to toggle this down and we're going to actually select that layer. Now, nothing has changed here. That is because the information we're pulling from this layer is coming from an effect that's been applied to it. So in order to tell it to read that, we have to come over here and tell it to actually read the effects and masks from that layer. Once we click that, we see something change over here. So what this displacement map is doing is it's reading these grayscale values, and it's using that to actually imitate the wrapping of a 2D image around this grayscale map. So anything that's brighter, more white, is going to get pushed closer to us on the z-axis, and anything that's darker is going to start to wrap around those edges there. So we can see the result of that here. If we mess around with our max horizontal and vertical displacements, we can actually start to rotate this image around. Now we get some weird stuff from our watermark, but that's okay. We can deal with that for right now. But we see some pretty cool stuff happening right off the bat. So that's our horizontal. We can also go vertical here. And that's pretty nice. So this is going to give us a really nice starting point to work with. Now that we've got that starting point in place, we can actually go ahead and animate this. This is super quick and easy, right? So I'm going to go ahead and reset this to its default value of 5. And let's pick a camera movement that we want. So maybe we want a little bit of side to side, but also we kind of want to pan up as we're moving. So let's go ahead and start with our vertical. And let's bring this down a little bit. Maybe we'll go somewhere around here. I think 20 looks pretty nice. So on our first frame, let's go ahead and drop a keyframe in there. I'll twirl down our effects so we can see our keyframes in the timeline. And then maybe we want to pan left to right. So we'll get a little bit, we'll come out this way just a hair. Maybe we'll try 15, or maybe we'll try -10, keep it subtle. Drop a keyframe there. And then let's jump out to our 15-second mark. And we're gonna want to actually pan up a little bit. And -20 is looking pretty good. I'm gonna store that value, and then we're gonna also want to move out. Maybe we'll go to 10. So now we have this simulated camera movement on a 2D image already looking really nice for us. I think I could use a little more horizontal displacement, so I'm just gonna bump this down to -15. Can look at that. And then I think I'm going to bring this up to +15 as well. So this should give us just a little more movement. And we see a little bit of weird stuff happening, but for the most part, if we ignore this watermark that's doing some strange things like cutting trees and stuff like that, for the most part, this looks pretty seamless and pretty good. And especially if we look right in this area here, where that kind of trail that fades away into the background is, we can see that it's actually revealing more of this here. Like, this is pretty amazing that it's able to do this quickly and this easily. So I really like this camera movement. So I'm going to leave this as is. We're going to call this good. So we have our kind of scene ready to go. The next thing we want to do is we want to drop our subject in, and we're going to play around with trying to do the same thing to our subject. Let's start by just locating our subject. Mine is called Hero Drawing. And let's just drop this in our composition on top of everything. Let's go ahead and scale it down. Get it to a scale that feels kind of natural. He should be standing closer to us. Maybe we want him over there, or maybe we even want to bring him forward a little bit, make him a little bigger. I'll bring him up, scale him down a bit. We're just trying to get this to feel natural right now. And I think that's pretty good. We'll leave him grounded right here. I like that. So we've got him scaled how we want. Once again, we'll leave color correction for the last step. We'll get all the animation in place and then we'll make things fit visually. But for now, we want to just apply the same effects that we did to our background to our subject. So let's start by finding our depth scanner and applying it to our subject. So again, right off the bat, we see this depth map pop up. And it's pretty good. We can click through some other options if we want. But I think this depth anything be too small. It's going to work pretty well for us. So just like we did with the background, now that we have that depth map generated, we want to duplicate this layer, delete the depth scanner from the top layer, and we want to replace that effect with a displacement map. and we want to pull information from our depth map layer, which is our second layer now. And we want to make sure that we tick effects and masks to tell it to actually read that depth map. And again, we see something happen there once we do that. Now, we also see, even though it's a transparent background, we see the depth map behind our subject as well. And there's an easy way to fix this. All we have to do is turn the visibility of our depth map layer off. Even with it not being visible in the scene, it will still pull information from that depth map to affect our displacement map here. And we can see that if we start to move our subject around. So we can get a little bit of rotation in our subject. And again, it's not completely perfect, but most of the imperfections we're seeing are actually just from the watermark. So if we ignore that, it's looking pretty good. We can get a little bit of rotation in there, and we can kind of see where we're headed with this. So let's toggle this down, and I'm going to go ahead and trim our comp so that we can remind ourselves of what our background is doing. Our camera is moving kind of from bottom left to top right. So we want to mimic that movement with our subject, which means we're going to want to turn him to the right to start, and then as our animation progresses, we're going to want him to slowly rotate to the left, and we're going to want to come up over him a bit with the camera. We're going to approach this in the same exact way as we did with the background. So let's go ahead and twirl this down so we can see our keyframes, make sure we're on our first frame here. And we know that we're going to want him to be rotated a little bit to the right to start. So let's throw in something, probably keep it more subtle than that. Maybe we'll go -20 here. And we also want to be kind of looking at him from below a little bit. So we can affect our vertical displacement. Maybe we'll put that at +20. Let's try that. So let's store those values. We'll drop our keyframes in. Then we'll come over to our 15-second mark, which is now the last frame of our composition. And I'm just going to invert these values. It worked well last time, so we can try it and see if it still applies here. So we'll go +20 for the horizontal, -20 for the vertical. And let's see how that looks. So it is subtle, but we are seeing him rotate just the way we want, right? We're coming around him. We could go a little more extreme with our values. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go to -25 actually, and +25. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. So +25 for horizontal and -25 for vertical. And that's giving us a little more movement. We can really see it in the legs here as we scrub through, right? And in the shoulders. So we're actually revolving around this character. So we've gone from a hand-drawn piece of art to something that we can actually rotate in 3 dimensions, or at least simulate that rotation of. The next thing we're going to want to work on here is keeping our subject grounded. So if we take a look at this, our subject is rotating with the image, but if we look at his feet here, we see the ground actually sliding beneath his feet. And that just, that doesn't feel real, it doesn't feel right, so we need to fix that. And there's a really simple way to fix it. Basically, we just need to track his movement to match where his feet start so that they end in the same spot with relation to this background image. I actually like his starting position. I think this is a nice spot for him to stand, so this is going to be the spot we want to match. So if we open up our transform parameters for our displacement map layer here, our layer 1, This is where we can actually animate his position. But before we do that, we need to make sure that we're not moving this displacement map layer off of our depth map layer. So let's just parent the two. So if we come to our depth map here, we can just click on this drop-down menu, select our hero drawing layer, our layer 1, and now wherever we move our top layer, our bottom layer is going to follow. So we won't lose that information. So now that we have them parented, let's go ahead and store this first position keyframe. And then we'll go out to our 15-second mark, which is now the last frame of our animation. And we need some way for him to end up in the same spot. So let's find kind of a landmark for us. I think looking at this, his left toe here is going to be a good spot to look. It's kind of covering up just the top of that crack there. So if we come out to the end, we just want to shift our layer so that it's sitting right on top of that crack. So you can also just click on the layer and use your arrow keys, and that'll give you some more fine-tune adjustments. And this seems pretty close to where we want to be. So let's scrub through and look at that there. It's pretty good. You might could shift a pixel or two to the left. Now that's really starting to feel a lot more grounded, more like he's rooted to one spot in the scene. So while we're zoomed in here, let's just turn off these two layers and let's focus just on this subject, because this will give us a much better view of what's going on here. So we can really see ourselves rotating around this hero artwork that started as a hand-drawn piece of art in 2 dimensions, and now we're simulating this 3D rotation around our character. So if we bring everything back into the scene, we can, let's scale this to fit, and let's watch this in real time. So this is looking really, really nice. We're seeing our background, we're panning around it, and we're actually panning around our subject as well, which is really cool, and it's amazing how quick and easy and easily we were able to do this with the help of our depth scanner plugin here. So I'm feeling really good about this animation. So now that we're in a good spot animation-wise, we can focus on some color correction. Just like we saw in the last segment, our color correction process here is going to start with our brightness and contrast and hue and saturation values, just like we did previously. So I do like the lighting of our background here, of our forest, kind of our scene, but I think we could enhance it a little bit. So I'm actually going to start there with our brightness and contrast. So I think I want it a bit darker. So let's take that brightness down a little bit. Let's boost that contrast. Go even a little darker maybe. And that feels pretty cool. It's kind of spooky, it's contrasty, it's focused. I like that. So that's what we're going to try to match. And I like the hue of it as well, at least for now. So let's start working on our subject. Oh, another important thing to note that I kind of neglected last time. Notice that we're applying these color correction effects to our non-depth map layer. By doing that, we're ensuring that we're not changing any of the color values of the original image that's providing the depth map. So we're not going to change any of that actual data. We're just changing the look of the result. So it's just an important thing to be aware of. So let's look at our hero now, our subject. We're going to want to bring his brightness down as well. Maybe boost that contrast a little bit. And we're definitely going to want to shift his hue here. So let's take a look at that as well. And he could use a little more red probably. That's getting pink. Maybe somewhere in there we can saturate him more. Bring him back a little bit. Something like that. And then we can come back up here. maybe a little more contrast. And that's starting to feel like it fits our scene a little more, I think. So this is pretty good. I'm feeling good about that. So we've got everything color matched. Things are starting to feel like they fit. And with that, once you find some color corrections that you're happy with, this is our animation. So we've done it. So yeah, I'll go through a quick recap. Throughout this whole tutorial series, we have started with creating a parallax from Photoshop in a Photoshop workflow where we cut everything out, isolated our foreground, midground, and background, and then we can move them against one another. Then we looked at how we can actually use our depth scanner plugin to speed that process up. And we ended up with a result like this and saw all the features that Depth Scanner has and how it can help us out with that process. And then finally, we looked at using a displacement map to pull information from our depth map to actually give us a sense of three-dimensional rotation and camera panning, starting with a 2D image. So I hope this series has been helpful. I'm excited to see what else Depth Scanner can do as they continue to improve it and debug it, because we see there are some imperfections, but this is a pretty new technology, and it's improving very rapidly. So I have really high hopes for where this can go, and even in these early stages, we can see that it is extremely powerful, and it allows us to approach 2D animation in a completely different way than I've been able to before. So once again, I hope this was helpful. Thanks for sticking along, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.